Welcome to the 7th episode of the Hali Hewa Podcast with your host, Abigael Kima. COP27 is finally here, and throughout the year we've been interviewing African experts and climate activists, allowing them to share their experiences and their stories as they advocate for climate justice in their unique capacities.
Today we are joined by amazing young people from the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition from across the globe who are also doing a lot more outside of the coalition to ensure that communities are protected against the impacts of climate change. Our first guest today is Eva-Peace Mukayiranga. She's an environmentalist and climate finance negotiator in the UNFCCC. Eva works to advance the needs and priorities of vulnerable countries in terms of climate finance and loss and damage within the international and national fora. In addition, she focuses on scaling up climate action education on the ground towards a transition to a green economy within the local NGO, the Green Protector. Eva is the co-founder, training working group coordinator of the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition. Our second guest, Mamadou Sylla, is an environmental activist from Senegal and a member of ASAN, an non-governmental organization working on the protection of nature and the promotion of sustainable tourism. Founding member and president of Nature Friends, UGB in 2019, the local branch of ASAN in Gaston Berger University. He is currently serving as an advocacy coordinator for the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition. Our third guest, Eric Njuguna, organizer for Fridays for Future Kenya, consultant at UNICEF and director of international affairs at Kenya Environmental Action Network. And finally, we have Samuel Chijioke, who is the founder of the Youth for Today initiative and leads the POP Nigeria initiative on climate education. Welcome to the Hali Hewa Podcast. It is such an honor to have all of you on set today. So when I was interviewing most of the activists and experts, some of them have had personal experiences that led them to do the kind of work that they do now, or they saw something happening within their community and they decided to do something about it. And you are also passionate and authentic advocates for climate justice, and I am just interested to know how you came to care so deeply about that. So can I perhaps invite you to share a little bit about when and how this all started for you? Eric, do you mind going first?
Yeah, sure. So I became a climate justice organizer because I saw firsthand the impacts the climate crisis is having on Kenyans today. So at the time I became a climate justice organizer, that is around 2017, there was a severe drought which put millions at risk of severe hunger. And having seen the impacts that had on Kenyans, especially women and children, that pushed me to ask myself what next, what needs to be done so that we avert this crisis. And so that shows you that most of us became climate justice organizer, not because it's necessarily a passion, but because there is no other option. You have to resist and take action. Otherwise, the impacts will continue being worse, and no action will be taken from global North leaders and the fossil fuel industry.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. And to Mamadou Sylla, what was it like for you? Why did you decide to be an activist?
I like to say always that we are the generation that were born into the middle of a chaos. Like we were really born in a context of catastrophe, in a context of chaos, where where we could see the consequences of climate change actually, and we had no choice than to act. So I think my journey started officially. Let's say we've always, as I said, we were born in the middle of a chaos, and we have always tried to bring some solutions. But I would like to say officially, it was in 2016 or 2017, something like that, when one of my best friends invited me to co-create an organization, which is the Nature Friends, UGB. We were just in our university. We were just in the first year of our university, and then we decided to create this organization to try to address the environmental issues first within the campus, but also outside the campus. And then it was in the same year that we were linked with ASAN, ASAN, which is Association Sénégalaise des Amis de la Nature, which are working on the protection of nature as well. And then in that organization, I had the chance to meet, thousands or hundreds of like-minded people who are determined, who are really committed to change how things go on in the world. And then with these people, there was a strong bond with them, and also from there on, we also met with other like-minded people from Africa. We started from Senegal, but also we met with other young people from Africa, but also from the global North countries. And I think this has been a very big milestone to me, to get connected with thousands of young people. Another milestone as well is when I met when I get involved in the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition in 2020, where also I had to meet other young people. I think just wanted to explain that meeting young people around the world in Africa, in the global South and global North, has really is really a sort of more engagement, more commitment. But then, we have always tried to do our best to address climate justice issues.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I genuinely think young people are really taking leadership and are doing so much within their communities to make sure that we create awareness on climate issues. And as you have said, we were born into a catastrophe, and we really don't have a choice but to do something about it. So thank you so much. To Eva, I'd really love to hear how your journey began.
I guess mine kind of also. I've been invited to join a local NGO to help within the finance department, things like that. I was more focused on looking at the banking sector as a career or something. But then with my involvement in the local NGO, I thought there will be no economic development without considering the impact of climate change. I mean, if we were building schools, hospitals, and striving for economic development, and then there is floods and storms that strike one day and everything is lost. I think that was my point of entry. I thought I'll focus more on loss and damage and climate finance issues and have my way of contributing that way in the economic development by taking into account the impacts of climate change. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And finally, Samuel, how did this begin for you?
Okay, so for me, it's been a journey that keeps improving every day, and it's also something that I hope not to give up so easily, even though at times you feel like giving up because you are not actually getting most of the results you anticipate from. Yeah, so for me, my journey in the climate space started late 2017, so early 2018, approaching to COP24. Yeah, so I know I have been a victim, or a survivor rather, of climate change and induced disasters leading to loss and damage, and associated with outbreak of disease and illness. And talking about malarias and allergies, fever, to a point I was hospitalized and I couldn't speak nor hear for 3 days, so I was deaf and dumb. And associated with traumas like nightmares, post-traumatic stress and disorder, And then I also, to a point, I was traumatized, even suicidal. So I had suicidal thoughts going through my head at a very tender age. And I don't know anybody that has ever gone through such before, but it was so severe that I stayed in a flooded house for 3 years until we had to relocate to another community afterwards. So for me, climate change action or climate action is something I see as a non-negotiable option that people get to know about, because the more people know about it, the more it helps people to tackle this particular menace. And coming up, I've also been able to work with various youth across the continent, supported various youth as well across the continent with seed grants to carry out climate change adaptation projects in their various communities. And apart from that, too, I have also worked with international organizations that are focused also in policy making. Like for the Globe Nigeria, I am the communications and policy advisor. Globe means Global Legislators for Balanced Environment is also a platform, one of the parliamentary platforms that heads the UNFCCC when it comes to making parliamentary decisions. I've also worked for other organizations like the pop movement and the likes. So in all these things, my major aim is to project climate action and also to mobilize youth in their various communities to take climate action that can be able to address necessary climate change issues. And even for you guys, contact point person, talking about loss and damage, which is something that I have been a victim of, is also an opportunity for me to amplify more youth voices and also project Global South and the need for COP27 to adopt loss and damage as a separate agenda item to be discussed in COP27, and also to project climate finance as a non-negotiable viable option to address climate change issues across the globe, but more in particular, Global South. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us on this podcast, and I'm really sorry that you had to experience that. And I just want to let all of you know that it really is bold of you to actually do something about it, because it's one thing to experience it or see other people experiencing the impacts of climate change, and it takes a lot of courage and boldness to actually do something about it. So keep doing what you do. Now let's talk about loss and damage, which I know is quite a contentious issue this year, and it is one of the major things that us young people are trying to push world leaders to act on. And you all are part of the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition, which brings together youth from the Global South and North, and have come together to demand action on addressing loss and damage caused by climate change. And for our listeners, loss and damage in the context of climate change means the impacts of the climate crisis that has exceeded our capacity to adapt as countries, communities, and the ecosystem as well. And this was a big topic during COP26 with a lot of expectations, but the outcome was barely adequate to address this issue. The Glasgow Pact called for a dialogue between parties to discuss the arrangement of funding activities to avert and minimize loss and damage, which is obviously not substantial enough. And the conversation now is around the establishment of a loss and damage finance facility. So Eva, you decided to put together this coalition, and I'd really love to know what was the inspiration behind it to put this together and bring youth from across the globe to demand for action from world leaders.
It's a work of teamwork of everyone who have experienced loss and damage or have saw the devastating impact of loss and damage that brought the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition to the world, I guess. And when it started, as you saw, loss and damage is not a new topic. If you read different articles, the first mention of loss and damage came back to 1991. But so far, there has been no loss and damage finance provided, despite the developing countries calling for loss and damage finance. So it was in 2019. I guess I learned about the policies of around loss and damage in the UNFCCC, and we thought we could do something. We can contribute in a way to advocate and for a loss and damage finance facility, but more not just a facility, but for loss and damage finance being a reality and being provided. So that's where the idea came from, with the different people, as you said, just people based in Rwanda, the others based in the global north, and that's how it came to be.
When we had the conversation with your team earlier, you explained that it's organized in working groups, and some of those working groups include trainings, negotiations, storytelling, campaigning, and advocacy. So Mamadou, kindly break this down for us and help us understand how the various working groups operate, and how any other young person can be part of these working groups to support the work.
Yeah, sure. Yes, actually, our organization, the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition, is organized into working groups. We have the storytelling working group, which is led by Adeline, who's not here. And then we have the training working group, which is led by Eva. And then we have also the communications working group that are in charge of all the social media things of the coalition that are led by Kevin and Paul Chukuma. And then we have the advocacy working group, which is led by me, Mamadou, and then High Center, my co-coordinator, who is not here. And yes, we have also coordinators from the Pacific, which is not exactly a working group in itself, but then it's a new strategy of LDYC actually to kind of like have community related actions. And then we have a Pacific LDYC, which has been created in the last months. And then we are planning actually to have a research working group, kind of like to improve research actually on loss and damage. We've been working with some partners, and then there's within LDYC there are some people who are really committed and who are really interested in doing some research around loss and damage. So anyone who wants to join the coalition, you can join at different levels actually. If you want to engage within the working groups, you can be part of any working group you want, whether it's a storytelling, training, advocacy, or communications to help monitor work in that, or you can just be a member of LDYC without taking part in each working group. But then if you are part of the working groups, then you have to, the working groups, they have like bi-weekly meetings, like each working group, they have bi-weekly meetings. And then if you are interested, you are kind of like, you can join those meetings and then help kind of like delivering the task. And then if you choose to be just a member of the coalition, you can engage also within the coalition and participate in every event you want. Mm-hmm. So being a part of the working groups kind of gets you actively in the making process of all the activities and all the actions that are delivered within the coalition. Mm-hmm. So basically that's how we are organized, but then it's a moving process. Maybe in the next months or in the next years we'll have to add other working groups or add some other things, yes, depending on the strategy of the coalition.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I think as part of the description, I will link the websites and everything else, so that if anyone wants to reach out, they can directly maybe reach you through the website or your social media platforms. So thank you for sharing that. And Eric, you are a very multi-talented youth mobilizer, and I have seen some of your work through the Fridays for Future movement here in Kenya. And so how does the work you are doing at the coalition feed into your day-to-day activism? And do you sort of use your platforms to speak on issues of loss and damage? How does it work?
Yes. So I am an organizer with Fridays for Future, and in the lead up to COP27, which we hope to use as a platform to push and advocate for loss and damage finance, my work with Fridays for Future, we organized a strike just recently in Nairobi, which was attended by thousands of youth from Nairobi and other parts of the country. And youth showed up to demand for loss and damage finance because they also realized the impact the climate crisis is having on local communities and the losses and damages it is already creating. That is why we brought together hundreds and of youth from Nairobi to come and make their voices heard on what is this they want for Africa in the lead up to COP. For us to be able to achieve climate justice for Africa, it is a prerequisite for us to be able to have loss and damage finance, because the climate crisis is already having severe impacts that are irrevocable. And that is why we need these communities who had the least role in causing the climate crisis supported. And in the lead up to COP27, our advocacy points around loss and damage finance and the creation of a whole loss and damage finance facility is that the loss and damage finance that should countries and Africa should be given in grants, because global north countries need to realize the historical role they had in causing the climate crisis and realize that loss and damage finance is not aid, it's reparations. At a time when the climate crisis is already wreaking havoc on the lives of many, we should not be paying back debt for a crisis we had the least role in causing. And the fact that climate finance has been given to global south countries in the form of debt, just shows the neocolonial agendas that dominate in today's global climate crisis, in today's global climate politics, and it also shows how in the name of solutions, climate finance is actually exacerbating the existing debt crisis in global south countries. And that is why we are pushing for loss and damage finance to be in form of grants, because it's reparations. And one thing that is quite striking and keeps me thinking a lot is that we have been demanding for loss and damage finance for a couple of years now. And the fact that we're demanding for loss and damage finance shows that the fact that we even need it in the first place just shows existing climate, existing policy failure, because we shouldn't need loss and damage finance in the first place. But the fact that we need it right now shows that there has been years of ignorance, because we have known the science for years, and multiple reports come in year out telling us to act on the climate crisis. But the fact that world leaders have failed is why we need loss and damage finance in the first place. And at a time when loss and damage is already facing communities severely, and the climate crisis is also accelerating, there has been little to no action to tackle the climate crisis. The goal is that we should limit our global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees. And the window for action is closing, because right now the planet has warmed by around 1.2 degrees. And the goal for 1.5 is actually a political compromise, because we should not be targeting 1.5, because the impact 1.2 has already had, because the climate crisis we are facing right now, like the ongoing droughts, is as a result of just 1.2 degrees of warming. So imagine what the impact 1.5 degrees would have on communities. It's just, I even begin shaking when thinking about it. So and at a time when we have warmed by 1.2, the planet has warmed by 1.2 degrees, and this is just the impact. You'd think that it would push world leaders to act. But the kind of resistance global South countries and the civil society faced at the SBs in Bonn when they were demanding for loss and damage finance is just shocking. It's just shocking kind of resistance they faced from global North leaders. I have had leaders who have explicitly said that they're not interested in funding loss and damage finance, which is shocking, and just shows the kind of ignorance and disconnect from reality, because loss and damage finance is already having severe impacts. People are dying, and you'd think that is a wake-up call, but it isn't.
Yeah. Wow, thank you for sharing that so passionately. And I completely agree with your sentiments because not early, but sometime this year, I went to the northern part of Kenya since I'm also based in Kenya. And this community has not seen rain for almost 2 years or more. And so you wonder, what are they supposed to adapt to? They cannot adapt to lack of water or lack of food, and their livestock are just dying. You drive through vast lands of animal carcasses, and I was so devastated seeing that, and I know it feels so far away because I don't live there, but then it's also very coming really close to home. And the more we wait, the more communities are losing their lives, are losing their livelihoods. And thank you for flagging it as reparations, because it is exactly what we are asking for. And at a very personal level, I believe in the power of storytelling, because how I see the climate debate is, for a long time we've talked about it in terms of statistics and numbers, which look very far-fetched, but then we have lived experiences of the climate crisis here in Africa, here in Global South, here in Kenya. And so I feel like storytelling is such a powerful advocacy tool to demand action to address loss and damage, which includes but not limited the demand of a loss and damage finance facility. And I noted that you launched a storytelling cohort in June as the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition. So in your area of focus, which is climate education, Samuel, have you used storytelling as a tool, and what would you say is a more effective way of boosting climate literacy among the communities you interact with, which of course in the end sort of influences policy with the governments and with the institutions that are concerned with such policy issues? What do you think, Samuel?
So thank you so much for that question. First of all, we haven't launched storytelling yet in Nigeria in that regard. So probably if you saw it anywhere, I don't think it's from us. Just to be clear on what we are doing in Nigeria. So for the Pop Nigeria Initiative on Climate Education, what we try to do is to educate communities, especially at the grassroots, on climate change impacts, and also to support them in addressing climate change issues. And then we believe incorporating these solutions with community-based approach is best, because I believe something that before we tackle climate change issues, we should understand from the perspective of the community what that problem is all about. And we should not do it outside the perspective of the community or what the community knows. So we launch a climate education project in communities. We try to use the power of language, first of all. So if we are in a southern or northern community where they speak more of their dialect, so we try as much as we can to use their language to educate them on what climate change is all about. We also try as well to use info and pictorial evidences and things they can easily relate with around the environment to tell them what climate change is all about. Because we've noticed over time, based on our engagement and interaction with these people at local grassroots, that they have been some misconception or misinterpretation of what climate change is all about. So you get to ask people of what climate change is all about. They get to tell you that is consequences, is punishment from the gods as a result of their sins. So they are paying for their evil deeds. So the gods is punishing them. That is what people get to tell you, especially those at the grassroots, what they think climate change is all about. So we've been able to demystify these myths of what they feel climate change is all about. And also we've been able to use live realistic examples to disclose to them what climate change is all about. Like we've been able to talk to them about drought, about conflict, about migration, about loss and damage. And another thing too we've been able to adopt is the tool of tackling climate change from more holistic approach. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Just move your
Okay.
mic away from your mouth a little.
Okay, so the tool of tackling climate change from a more holistic perspective, where we talk to them about agro-tree plantation as an adaptive approach to tackle climate change issues, because we believe these communities, they experience erosion, they experience flooding, and this affects them. About 90% of the residents in these communities are farmers, and out of this 90%, 70% are females. So you also see more of gender-based induced violence as a result of climate change issues. So we encourage them to engage in agro-tree plantation. We also encourage them to engage in planting of resilient and climate-resilient crops on their farmlands to boost soil fertility. And by encouraging them, we do not just tell them by words. We also try as much as we can to provide these resources for them to implement in their farmlands. Like we've done a lot of tree planting across 28 states in Nigeria out of 36. We've been engaged with over 200,000 beneficiaries across Nigeria, and the project as well has been replicated in over 10 African countries as well, in terms of using climate change education as adaptation to mitigate and address climate change issues across borders. And this has been productive because we have gotten recommendations from Climate Chance as the best climate change education project in Nigeria and one of the best climate change education projects in Africa. And we've gotten endorsement from the Federal Republic of Nigeria as also one of the most active climate change education projects across boards. And this is also a major project. We've also won national awards and international awards as well in that regard. So climate change education, for me, I feel is a way of expressing our own concern on tackling climate change issues, because people at the local level may not be able to understand what climate change is all about, or unless we tell it to them, bringing it down to their local level of understanding, or unless we educate them about it, and also unless we tell them the physical presentation of what climate change is all about. Because you cannot tell a local farmer the science behind climate change. They will not believe you. They will feel you want to brainwash them. But when you tell a local farmer the ideal sense of what is passing through and you link it up with the adverse effect of climate change on his farmland, he can be able to relate. And when you tell him the necessary actions that he needs to take to curb these issues, he can be able to act on it, because it's something that he can be able to identify with, and also it's something that he can easily work on. So this is what we've been able to do in time past. And even you can, if you go through the Pop Nigeria Initiative website, you can see we even have to engage people under trees, people that don't have classrooms. We have to engage under trees. We have to engage with policymakers. We have to engage with stakeholders. And this climate change education, we are not just educating, we are using approaches. We've trained farmers on agroecology, where they get to use an agroecological process on their farmlands to boost soil yields and also crop production. We've also trained teachers as well on tree planting processes. We've also donated fruit trees to schools, so that we are looking in a way whereby fruit will not just depend on normal tree planting, but also planting fruit trees, and once it grows, it also have economic benefit and economic impact to the student and to the school at large. We've also educated stakeholders on the need for them to advocate for climate actions. We've mobilized youth. We've carried out climate strike. We've done a lot of things, and these are activities that we've been able to incorporate into our climate education projects. And we are also even upscaling. We've done beach cleanups, and this beach cleanup is not just beach cleanup like we all know, but in this beach cleanup, we try as much as we can to provide giant iron baskets, waste baskets for the beach that to tackle indiscriminate plastic disposal. So instead of doing a beach cleanup without a waste basket, we said, so we have to do a beach cleanup and we have to provide a giant iron basket for the beach. So once beach users finish using plastics, they get to discard it in that iron giant waste basket. And we are also doing another beach cleanup as well, and it's tagged Life on Land. And one of the things we hope to achieve this is to do a beach cleanup and also to plant trees in the beach that will promote this sense of sustainable environmental practice in the beach, and also that will send a message of tree planting that incorporates or inculcates the Life on Land approach, where you see livelihood being enhanced, and also you see the aquatic species being protected, and also the environment as well being protected with green nature and all that. So we are canvassing for the three-tier economy, which is the circular economy, the green economy, and the green economy. And these are some of the things we've been able to do in Nigeria, and also some of the projects we've been replicating across the African continent. Thank you.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I think it's a very holistic approach and also very inclusive because it touches on almost every aspect of the environment. And now we move to the final segment of the podcast, which is the call to action for COP27. And I know everyone has called the COP happening in Egypt an African COP, and I say it in quotes because it means different things for different people. And I do understand that you have a COP27 strategy. Eva, do you mind breaking down that for our audience, and let's understand what the strategy is and how we can also jump in and support?
Thank you so much. I feel like the most important thing I should mention is the Lesson Damage Finance Now campaign that we launched, and it's now available. As we say, the storytelling is a powerful tool to be able to bring that voices of those impacted by loss and damage at the conference, also in front of decision makers, to be able to build maybe. As you said, the statistic have its limitation, but when it's a story, as you said, of carcass you've seen, has much more impact on you and that sense of wanting to do something about it. So the Loss and Damage Finance Now campaign is out now, and there's a possibility for joining the campaign and recording your own stories, what the country you're from, and then how you're affected by climate change, and also why do you need loss and damage finance, or what key message you want to share, and then also be able to capture the message from young people or their perspective on how they're impacted by climate change, but also what they want to see, what outcome they hope for. So that's the main thing we're working on right now. It's out now, and for those who want to jump, please do. We'd like to collect as many stories of youth, how they're impacted by loss and damage, and what they hope to see, what key message they want to share. And a part of that, there's also different trainings happening, raising awareness on loss and damage, and then it will also happen at COP27. Some my side event we will contribute on, and also there's COP27 demands, but I think Mamadou will come on that. I think that will be it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I will also link the loss and damage finance campaign on the description, and also just be able to collect as many stories as possible on loss and damage. So I'll be sure to do that on the description. And to the COP27 demands, Mamadou, share with our audience what you would say are the COP27 demands according to what you have been working on.
Yes, sure. Actually, just one thing to add regarding like our COP strategy is that like otherwise you will have a delegation at COP. Most of them are negotiators for their own country, but also we'll have observers and other young people who are doing actions on ground. So we have a large delegation that is participating in COP27 at Egypt, and then we are holding also a side event at the Resilient at the Youth and Pavilion at the Resilient Hoop, I guess. I don't know exactly. But then we are holding a side event. So if anyone is around at COP, we can link up and try to have actions on ground, and then, yes, gather our efforts. And regarding the COP27 demands, it's also one very big milestone, because all our COP strategy is let's say encouraged by these demands. And our main demand is actually loss and damage finance now. So it's a demand that it's a thing that kind of like sustains our organization, that we've been working for since day one of LDIC. We've been working to address this issue. Is loss and damage finance now. It's just our main demand. And then we have also additional demands. Actually, one thing is just why loss and damage finance is important. Somebody said it. It's like one thing we are demanding on finance, as someone said it, is like where we want like a new additional and accessible, I insist on accessible finance for the communities that are suffering from loss and damage. And then we don't need like let's say, to give examples on why finance is needed. We have the examples Pakistan in the last few months, and then we have other countries that are suffering from loss and damage. And then these countries do not have maybe the necessary resources to address that. Like every year we have like countries that loses, or let's say that kind of like loses like 1 trillion, let's say, of money, of their resources to address loss and damage. And they need this finance, and then these countries, they're advocating for that for years now. And then we are here as an organization to support on addressing loss and damage finance. So this is our main demand, and this is our first demand. But then we have additional demands. We have also demands regarding the Santiago network on loss and damage, which was like established at COP25 in Madrid, but then which is not fully operationalized. So we are demanding that the Santiago network is fully operationalized at COP27. Oh, we have also other demands regarding loss and damage at the permanent agenda. So despite the fact that loss and damage is now an issue, no, everyone is aware that loss and damage is an issue that it needs to be addressed. So we have no discussion on that. But then we see that every year we have to say, okay, we have to do some activism so that loss and damage is in the agenda every year. So hopefully this year as well in Egypt we have loss and damage in the agenda. But then we want at the coalition that loss and damage be made as a permanent agenda item in all negotiations, whether it's in the COP, whether it's in the SBs, and so on and so forth. So this is also one thing that we are demanding to be resolved at COP27. The other thing is that we want loss and damage to be in the global stake of the Paris Agreement. So the global stake is just set like to assess like the collective progress on the implementation of the Paris Agreement, and then we want loss and damage to be addressed also in the GST. So we have other demands. So maybe one other thing is youth inclusion in the decision making processes. So we want loss and damage. We want like the stakeholders to have a youth advisory committee on loss and damage, to kind of like support to include young people in decision-making processes, not just to have them here as a background, but then to include them in the process of decision-making. So this is also one thing that we think is very important. So you can read the whole demand. I can share the link to the whole demand. So there's a lot of details in it, not just, I just try to have a summary, but then there's a lot of demands, a lot of details that you can read. And if you agree with us, you can also sign the demands that we are sharing with the stakeholders and parties at COP27.
Great. Thank you for sharing that as well. And I will also link that that demand so that anyone else can sign on and have as many voices as possible demanding for the same thing. Thank you. And Eric, what would you define as a successful COP after the 2 weeks is over?
All right. So what I would define as a successful COP would be, I think, first of all, success pretty varies depending on what success means to you. And this is the 27th COP. So this is the 27th opportunity to be able to tackle the climate crisis following 26 others that have failed. So I think it's time we realize that change is not limited to happening in conferences. That for us to be able to tackle the climate crisis and bring climate justice to Africa, we need to look beyond what a conference the conference can do, and think about how we bring systemic change, because we need to dismantle existing systems of oppression so that change needs to happen. Otherwise, what will come out as change or as success in spaces like COP will end up creating more harm, like climate finance when it creates debt, or like when people are recommending carbon offsets, but they end up displacing indigenous communities out of their land, or that kind of thing that happens at spaces like COP. So I think what I would see as a success for COP is when we have a stronger movement coming out of that space, because thousands of indigenous people and people from the global south will be gathering in Sharm el-Sheikh to make their voices heard, strategizing together and building a stronger movement to fight for climate justice in their own communities. And I feel like that would be one indicator of success that will bring us closer to climate justice, because climate justice can only be brought through people power. Because of years of failed policies have shown us that for change to happen, we need to have a stronger civil society, stronger people and supported communities. And we cannot have that if we're not supporting movements and working to make their voices heard. In terms of policy action bring about by world leaders at COP, I think years of multiple policy failures have shown us that for change to happen, we need systemic change, which happens gradually. Change doesn't happen in one, from 5th of November to 18th of November, voila, climate finance is brought, loss and damage finance is there. It would happen in that way, because there is already existing systems of oppression that derail the change from happening. And that is why we need to work longer term systemic transformation. But the indicator for success for me would be just that, stronger movements working to dismantle the systems of oppression. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. That's a brilliant answer. So building stronger movements, and because action does not only happen at the conferences, and I genuinely have more hope in communities and building the solidarity. Finally, Samuel, very briefly, what are your call to action for COP27, and then we wrap up.
Okay, so for me, my call to action for COP27 is simple. Being the contact point for younger loss and damage is also something that we are pushing for. We have our demands already for COP27, pushing for countries to have loss and damage reserve funds to help them in terms of whenever they have this occurrences that are already happening, so it can also help them to adapt and also mitigate a lot of things. Because we see that countries, especially global south, are vulnerable more to loss and damage because there is no loss and damage reserve fund to tackle loss and damage issues. And then we are also pushing for the need for youth to be included in the policy making and implementation process, and also for countries to finance loss and damage. We are pushing more for grant-based approach for loss and damage. Because we know that there have been a lot of neglect when it comes to loss and damage finance facility being financed. So we are trying to push for or lobby in the process of bringing about grant-based financing for loss and damage. And our negotiation with the EU government last month, we also presented this to them, and based on the briefing and statement released by the EU, I think this week or last week, it was captioned that the EU is also pushing strongly for a grant-based approach for loss and damage finance, and we are seeing that as a major progress. And for me, one of the things that I would say about COP27 is, if COP27 does not deliver the implementations of previous COPs, then I feel COP should be scrapped out. There should be nothing like COP anymore, because if we have been having COP, and there has been a lot of pledges, there have been a lot of promises, and the implementation has been nothing to write home about, then there is no need of bringing or having more COPs when there is no implementation. COP27 is African COP, however, is also implementation COP. Looking at the remarks of the president of Egypt, he said the COP is a call for implementation, it's call for action. So if this COP does not bring about tangible actions, tangible implementations, that will help Global South mitigate climate change issues. I think there should be no COP anymore. We've already seen the pledges, and I don't feel that there should be need for pledges anymore in COP. I feel there should be policies, because we are also pushing for policies to be made for loss and damage frameworks. Loss and damage should have a policy framework, and this policy framework should be more concise, in the sense that whenever countries make pledges for loss and damage finance, there should be a policy that will be able to regulate the funding processes. And also, the policy should also recommend sanctions for countries that do not meet up to their pledges. So if, for instance, countries like US or UK or Germany or the likes make a pledge for loss and damage, and there should be a specified year, and if they do not meet up, there should be a policy that says, or a sanction that says, if you do not meet up, this should be what is expected of you as a sanction. And that process, we can be able to track a lot of pledges and fundings and promises made by countries, and also we'll be able to reduce a lot of unaccounted, which will be able to track a lot of things when it comes to trustworthiness and also unaccountability of most of these funding pledges made by Global North and developed countries. So this is part of our demand. However, I'm strongly saying it, and just for emphasis, that if COP27 do not deliver its implementation, then COP should be scrapped out. There should be nothing like COP anymore. So we know that we are not just coming every year to gather just for fun, because right now COP is turning to a festival. You have people from different countries just gather, you interact, and you go home. However, this COP should make a difference, should say, we are implementing this, and we are implementing this. And those implementations should be backed up with policies that will be able to provide implementation approach and implementation framework that will usher in sustainable practices of what those actions are all about. It should be measurable by time, and also it should be adequately supervised by countries, and it should be also implemented, or it should be reflected in countries' NDCs, so that we know that these actions are actually trackable and then they are measurable. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I have really enjoyed having a conversation with you. You're also very passionate, and I appreciate that you've taken your time to sit and have a conversation with me.